Hey everyone, my name is Athanasios Bonas. I have two academic publications on the topic of ancient Hellenic athletics, particularly on Pankration, and I'll be reviewing a clip wherein Chael Sonnen talks about Pankration's inclusion or lack thereof in the modern Olympics. Who's Chael Sonnen?
You want to know who Chael Sonnen is? Chael Sonnen is a tyrant. Chael Sonnen is a dictator. Chael Sonnen is the leader of the free world. Chael Sonnen has the skills to make Superman run and hide like a little girl. Chael Sonnen could walk on the sun and wouldn't even melt. Chael Sonnen could wear the Golden Gate Bridge as his championship belt. 217 perfectly woven pounds created by God. Chael Sonnen is the sheriff in this town. There was a bus this is a true story. There was a bus that pulled up to a red light, and little Nog tried to feed it a carrot while Big Nog was petting it. He thought it was a horse. This really happened.
Do you really believe that Minotauro thought that a bus was a horse?
That happened.
He's a legend, but even legends need to be scrutinized every once in a while, so let's see what he has to say.
MMA into the Olympics. Khabib Nurmagomedov has set an initiative, come out publicly and said he's going to see to it that MMA gets into the Olympics, and he's going to meet with the president of the IOC to make his pitch. And I would love to see that get done.
I've heard about Khabib approaching the IOC, but never any follow-up on what was said or what came out of it.
That's a tough one. It's a tough one in both directions. Let's start with keeping it out. Keeping it out is very hard to do, okay? It's hard to do because the sport of pankration, which is what mixed martial arts is, it's the sport of pankration. I have the foggiest idea how they even got away with renaming themselves.
Basically, yeah, Pankration is the original all-encompassing combat sport practiced in large-scale competitions, and it was in the ancient Olympics for nearly 1,000 years, if not longer. Keeping it out is a complete disgrace.
Used to be in the Olympics. Now, not the modern Olympics. We've only heard about this through legend. We don't have any video of it, but it was the national sport of Greece.
I guess you could say it was a national sport. I mean, Greek city-states from all across the Hellenic world competed in Pankration in the Olympics and in other pan-Hellenic events.
And Athens is where the first ever Olympic Games were. Was taken out in 1904 or after the 1904 games.
The first ancient Olympics and all subsequent games were always held in the same place, Olympia, which is located in the western Peloponnese. In Athens, there was a different athletic event called the Panathenaic Games. The first modern Olympics were held in the Panathenaic Stadium in 1896, so I get the confusion. Of course, not holding the Olympics in Olympia goes entirely against the ancient tradition, which is actually pretty on brand for the modern Olympics. But in these 1896 games, neither Pankration nor boxing were present. Boxing was introduced in 1904, and Pankration is still absent. Now the question becomes, why wasn't it introduced in the earlier games? And there's probably multiple valid answers. One is that there weren't many established practitioners of comprehensive combat sports back in the early 20th century. But I think the main reason why it was never introduced all the way till now is because there's this common misconception that Pankration matches were incredibly brutal, which is completely false. This is the main misconception I'm trying to dispel with my academic studies and of course this channel. Remember, the Olympics were about friendly competition among all city-states, many of which were constantly teetering on the edge between peace and war. Having a fatality or a serious injury in competition would threaten the ideal of the Olympic truce and or the goodwill of the city-states towards the Ilians who organized and ruled over the event. This is why boxing was introduced after wrestling in the ancient games and Pankration after boxing. They were likely still figuring out the rules for each sport to ensure the safety of the athletes. All accounts of supposed Pankration brutality are Roman era, and 90% of it come from just two sources, Pausanias and Philostratos, and neither of them are credible.
But elements of pankration remain today. That is where Taekwondo, that is where boxing, that is where wrestling, that is where judo come in. Elements of pankration remain today, though the sport of pankration no longer does. So it's very hard to keep it out when it has such a history, and a history that elements of which are still contested to this day.
Exactly. I couldn't have said it better. This is why I care about Pankration returning to its rightful place in the Olympics. It was there originally, and it deserves to be credited as worldwide cultural heritage of all comprehensive combat sports.
There is nothing to bring validity to your sport faster or quicker or more definitively than having recognition from the IOC.
Again, spot on. Though I may have many gripes with the IOC, having a sport be recognized and included into the Olympics brings legitimacy and wide-scale recognition that is almost impossible to find elsewhere.
There is no way to call something a sport, to go, that's not even a sport. If you're in the Olympics, can't happen, doesn't happen. That would be wonderful for MMA. Now, I don't know that MMA needs that. There's something called the UFC. There's something called Bellator. I don't know that it needs that like other sports do, but it would be a pretty cool thing.
This is where I disagree. MMA does need this, because the athletes should have more independence and better pay than what the billionaires in this duopoly are currently giving them. You don't need to follow politics to know that having nothing but two viable options is not going to be beneficial.
It would be very hard to get it in unless we can have a competitive architecture as to how are we going to do this, starting with what are they going to wear. Because the Olympics is a tournament, first and foremost. Every single sport is contested in a bracketed format. So if you are talking about doing MMA, then what are they going to wear? How are they going to fight 4 times in 3 days?
Good question. I'd argue that protective gear of some sort would be a must, like shin pads or some form of headgear, but gloves would have to be out of the question, because the inclusion of gloves would alter the way the sport was carried out, and the unique techniques that are tied to the culture of the sport. I'd also argue that it would be better for the athletes to wear rash guards and shorts to avoid any grabbing onto clothing, which was also absent in ancient Hellenic Pankration. The protective gear can always be removed for Pankration matches outside of the Olympics.
Wrestling is 4 times in 1 day. They changed it. Boxing will use a week long, but it's still a tournament. And there's still 4 fights over a few days in each weight class. So there's ways to do it. Boxing does it. They're out there punching each other. They shorten the rounds. That's one thing they did that would be different from what your mind may think that you see on TV. It's not going to be 15 minutes a match. You're going to shorten it to 3 threes or 3 twos.
Or it could just be 1 round as it was.
They're going to go out and prove their point. If they can get a knockout, great. It's largely going to be a positional battle. Submissions are not going to come into play quite as much. That's okay. That's okay. But how are we going to do that, including the qualifications? And with what age groups? MMA in America, as we know it, is only recognized once you turn 18.
Again, by making the sport safer and sticking to the ancient rule set, which was designed to do just that. Doing so will allow for more frequent matches, the participation of younger athletes, and overall far less injuries than what we're used to seeing in MMA.
I understand that fighting is different. I fully understand. I'm sharing with you these are some of the problems. I don't even have an opinion or the answer to it. I'm suggesting for you that these things will need to be figured out if you're going to make a presentation to the president of the IOC.
Correct, and this is perhaps one of the most important issues, which I'm almost certain was not accounted for in the pitches for Pankration's inclusion thus far.
He's going to have a couple of questions, and they've tried to get Pankration back. They've never called it mixed martial arts. They've always called it Pankration. They've tried to get it back. And the IOC, as recently as 2016, which is the last time they looked at it, kicked the can, arguing we don't have a venue for it. That's how they got away with it.
Yeah, but I would also have rejected that presentation too. As far as I'm aware, they were approached by the WPAF, the World Pankration Athlema Federation, and if you've been following this channel, you know they have not the slightest clue of what Pankration was. If I were in a governing body of any institution and someone brought me a plagiarism of karate and asked me to include it under the false pretense that it's a historical martial art, despite having zero evidence to prove these assertions, I'd reject them too. I also doubt they had any good suggestions on how to make the sport fit into the parameters of the optics of the Olympics in terms of safety and approachability.
But it would be very interesting, particularly coming from somebody like Khabib, particularly if Khabib has a plan. If Khabib walks in and just goes, I really love mixed martial arts, can we get it in the Olympics? No, I need a plan. Lay this out for me. How are we going to do it? Who's going to oversee this? Are athletic commissions who oversee MMA now, are they going to oversee amateur MMA? I don't think so. No, they would have something else to do. That would halt and stop events in their tracks. So who is going to oversee it? Because we are still talking about minors, and we're talking about a pretty damn aggressive contact sport here.
This is a really good point about the logistics and bureaucracy involved, and the IOC surely doesn't want any extra work. There would definitely need to be a joint effort from existing organizations and athletic commissions to bring Pankration back into the event. Though, with the original rule set, it would be far easier to pitch than current MMA. I know I've mentioned Pankration's rules several times now, and I know you're probably wondering what exactly were these rules. I'm currently under a contract to write an academic book on the subject and can't release too much info prior to its publication, if I can make the deadline, that is. You'll have to be patient with me on this.
My only offer for you, there's major power that the Olympics can bring, major power, major recognition. And I think that I would love to know what Khabib's motivation is. Is it just I love the sport and I want to see more of it? I'm great with that answer.
I would love to know that too. I hope he's been asked that question at some point in the millions of interviews and podcasts he's been in, but if he has and I'm not aware of it, let me know in the comments.
Is his idea of, hey, I love this sport and I want to see a way that amateurs can gain more experience before they're forced to get a license and jump right in there to the deep end? I don't know if that argument would hold up. I don't know if that's something we need to look at. I don't know what his motivation. I'm sharing with you. I would be curious, what is Khabib's motivation? Why specifically does he want this in the Olympics? I hope he gets what he wants. I would love to see it in the Olympics. I'd love to see the elements that still remain within the Olympics. I hope that Khabib gets his way. Getting an audience with the president of the IOC is something that president is only taken out of respect to Khabib. So in many ways, we got one big shot at this, and it's Khabib.
I don't think it's MMA's one big shot, because with all due respect, I don't think Khabib had the knowledge of how to pitch the historicity of the sport to the head of the IOC. Either way, I do respect his passion for the sport and him taking the initiative. In fact, I wish more people from the MMA world would assist in this effort, because I know for a fact there are many big names interested in having an all-encompassing martial art in the Olympics, and I know some to even be particularly interested in Pankration. Not just Khabib, but Sonnen here, GSP, Danaher, and others. That's why if you're listening to this and have any connections with these big-name athletes and personalities, hook a brother up, will ya? But even if you don't, you can still help me build the channel. Share the videos and support the effort on Patreon if you can afford to, because let me tell you, I'm not someone in the academic institution club. I've had absolutely no help or funding from anyone in regard to the book I've been contracted to write. All my requests for an academic login so I don't have to buy every study I referenced have all been ignored, and all applications for grants have been denied. The only support I have for the authorship process of this book is Patreon. So if you too believe in the potential of Pankration, you can support the effort there. Overall though, Chael did an excellent job in conveying the importance of having an all-encompassing combat sport in the Olympics. This was a video that actually made me say, finally someone gets it. I only disagree with him on his support for the UFC and Bellator, and his pronunciation of Pankration, but everything else he says is spot on. Cheers for watching, special thanks to Generous Misanthrope, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Until then.